going to find out if Karen can figure out how to turn on the projector. But I appreciate being asked to come out and talk about the foundation anytime. The Community Foundation is one of those organizations in the community that a lot of people know we're here, but they don't necessarily know what we do. And I found it interesting, I'm sure a lot of you also have followed the news about the shooting in the Oregon District in Dayton. And one of the first groups that jumped in to do something was the Dayton Foundation. And we are a very similar organization, except a whole lot smaller and younger and not as wealthy as the Dayton Foundation. But when we talk about what a community foundation can do, we are, according to the IRS, in the same classification as a larger foundation like the Dayton Foundation, which I think the last number I heard was about $2 million they've collected for that Oregon District emergency fund that they're collecting for. So let me just, oh, there's Erica. This is her computer. There we go. Oh, don't do that. Oh, I think that's just my computer saying I'm not connected to the internet, and that's okay because I don't need to be. There we go. Okay, so Piqua Community Foundation last year celebrated our 25th anniversary in Piqua, and that's noted on the little koozies that we gave all of you today. Some of those were left over from last year's anniversary. The little slogan that the Community Foundation goes by is providing your opportunity to enrich your community. And the only reason that we exist is to try and do things that will make Piqua better. So I'm going to go through this very briefly. The foundation was established in 1993 in November, but they didn't actually start meeting until '94. So it's kind of still our 25th anniversary this year. For about the first 7 to 8 years, the foundation had no staff, no office, no anything. And the first board of directors did all the work themselves on their own dime. They bought their own stamps. They worked out of their own bedroom or bathroom or office or wherever they were. But by end of the year 2000, they decided if they really wanted the foundation to take off, they needed to formalize things a little bit more. So at that point, we established an office, and they hired a director, and that was me. And I've been there ever since then. Our original office was upstairs from where Joe's office is in what's now Mutual Federal Bank, but back then it was People's Bank. And thankfully, I don't have to climb those stairs anymore because that was one heck of a staircase we had to go up. But the mission of the foundation is to encourage charitable giving that will benefit people in Piqua, and to provide a variety of different ways that people who want to do something good in their community can do that. A lot of people don't realize the rules that the IRS sets up for us, but you know, the IRS can be sticklers about all kinds of crazy things, and there are a lot of things that we can do that maybe you on your own, even if you're trying to be a good citizen, can't do on your own. So that's part of the reason that we're here. Just real quickly, we do have an 18-member board of directors who are all local people from our area. They are not paid, but they are an important part of what our mission is at the foundation. We have an executive director, we have an assistant. We operate our office at 209 West Ash Street, and we have just this year started to name board members emeritus. And as I said, we've been around for 25 years now. We have some people who have been on the board from the beginning, and some of them are starting to retire now, and so we wanted to find a way to honor them for their service to the community. Okay, we have a twofold mission at the foundation. One is we accept money, and the other one is we give money away. That's the easiest way I can say it. So we encourage people to give to existing organizations, but we also have a number of different funds, and they're all mentioned in that annual report that you have in front of you. This year's annual report is due back from the printers this week, so we don't have it yet, but the majority of the funds are the same. You can find those in the book if you care about that, you know, that kind of thing. The foundation accepts gifts in a lot of different ways. In the book, you'll see a list of life trustees. There's about 150 of those. Those are people who have given at least $1,000 to the foundation. It can be a one-time gift, it can be over time. But the foundation trustees are actually the voting members of the foundation. So if you have made $1,000 worth of gifts throughout your lifetime to the foundation, then you get to be a voting member, so to speak. We also receive a lot of memorial contributions. We are fortunate that people are starting to know that we make grants to many, many different organizations in the community. So those people who want to come up with an organization to receive memorial gifts, but they don't really have a specific favorite organization in mind, sometimes we'll name the foundation to receive those gifts, and then we use that money to make more grants to the community. We have an annual giving report, annual giving campaign where we invite people to make gifts to us, and if you give at least $100 per person, then you're part of our inner circle, and those people are listed in the book as well. And then we have fund donors who are major donors who actually set up a fund to do something, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And the last way we accept gifts, which is probably something we're more well known for than anything else, is our Cakes for a Cause event, which we do every year in April. Cakes for a Cause, if you have never been there, is a giant community cake auction event that's held out at the Miami Valley Center Mall. We normally get cakes from individual people, from organizations, the Kiwanis for many years, usually did a pancake and sausage cake. And we also have businesses in the community that will put in a cake and most of these are not cakes that look like cake, they look like something. We have this event at the Miami Valley Center Mall. It's always the last Thursday and Friday in April. And the last couple of years we've raised about $20,000 each year for our community grant making from this event. It is something that people get very excited about. They're always already starting to ask us, when is next year's event and what's the theme going to be next year? And if I could remember, I would tell you. The theme,
Final destination.
Well, I believe the technical term is road trip.
Road trip.
Final destination. But anyway, we have a lot of fun coming up with the theme, and it's a really good committee that helps put all that together. In addition to all of our great committee members, we have people that sponsor the cakes. We have people that actually just give us cash to help defray the cost of doing the event. And then, of course, all the people that come out and buy cakes. And the cakes come with incentives, which are always the main thing I think that people are bidding on when we do that. Okay, the foundation itself has a number of different kinds of funds, and I'm just going to give you this because I don't think we're going to have a quiz later, and you probably don't care about the difference in all these funds. But let me just tell you a little story. I had, actually last Friday, I had a phone call from someone who said he has an elderly relative who's setting up her will, and she wants to give everything back to the community. She doesn't have any, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this. She doesn't have anybody in her family that she actually wants things to go to. So, and you can imagine. So he called me up and he said, can you talk to her about maybe doing a fund in your foundation? So, of course I said, yes, we'd love to do that sort of thing, but a lot of the kind of fund that you're going to have is dependent upon what you want the money to do, because as the donor, you make the first decisions. First on how big the fund's going to be and what you want the fund to do. And these are different types of funds up until you get to the community campaigns. And these are just some community fundraising things that we've been part of. We don't do this on a daily basis, but when the board of directors thinks it's worth our time and money, money being they have to pay us to do the work, and sometimes we put our own money into them too, but building the Alexander Stadium, for example, was the first community fund that we had. And that meant we collected all the money and all the pledges over time, and then we turned the money over to make the payments to the contractors. The Piqua turf field, when they put the artificial turf in the stadium, we did that one. We were collecting money for the Fort Piqua Plaza, building the education center onto the back of the Johnston Farm, and then more recently helping to collect the money for the iPiqua Fund, which is making grants to help redevelop the the lakefront and downtown area. I'm sorry, the riverfront and downtown area. Okay. If you are somebody who wants to set up a fund and you know absolutely what you want done with your money, then you want to set up a designated fund. I'm sure there's people in this room who know or knew Rose and Ray Lawler. Rose and Ray were wonderful community volunteers, and they knew exactly what they wanted their money to go to. And so they set up a designated fund in the foundation. And what that fund does is every year it writes a check to their 6 favorite organizations, and that's it. Because they always supported those organizations, and after they passed away, they wanted to still support those organizations. This fund, like a lot of the funds we have, are endowment funds made to last forever. So a percentage is given away, a fairly small percentage every year, so that the growth of the fund makes up for it, and eventually the fund gets bigger and bigger and gives away more and more money, but same percentage as it goes along. So that's an example of somebody, they knew exactly what they wanted done. We wrote it up, we set it up, they gave us the, in that case I think it was stock, but it got set up and now it just runs like clockwork every year. In fact, they said, could you write these checks in October? Sure. We don't care. We'll write them anytime we want. So every October, those checks go out. We have another designated fund that goes out in May. Not that busy in May. Sure, we'll write them in May. I mean, we try and work with the donors. I don't know why they wanted October. Doesn't matter. We'll do it when they want it. Now, most people don't have quite as clear an example as Rose and Ray did, because most of us, our thoughts change about who we might want to support this year or next year. So the majority of the funds we have in the foundation are donor-advised funds. And that means there's an advisory committee that meets usually once a year, but some of them meet twice a year or more often. And those funds are funds that will basically, they can make scholarships, they can make grants to charitable nonprofit organizations, but the committee each year meets and decides how much of the money to give away and who gets it. Bill Hartzell is an example of someone who set up a donor-advised fund, and his fund gives out both scholarships and grants. So in the spring, the committee meets and selects scholarship recipients. In the fall, they meet and determine who's going to get charitable grants. Now, this is actually, it's not the fall, it's the summer, because those grants go out next Wednesday on the 11th. And this is one of our few donor-advised funds that actually wants to get grant applications. So organizations actually fill out applications for these grants, even though they come from a named fund. Okay, organization endowment funds. These are ways that we can help already existing charitable organizations with money. The story behind this one is kind of interesting. I'm sure you all recognize the Johnston Farmhouse from the Johnston Farm and Indian Agency here in Piqua. One of the grandsons of John Johnston was married a Patterson. No, a granddaughter of, let me get that right, a granddaughter of the Johnstons married into the Patterson family. And this gentleman, when he passed away, gave an endowment to the Ohio Historical Society at that time for the upkeep of his grandparents' home, the farmhouse here, or his great-grandparents' home. But what happened over time as the directors of the Johnston site and the people at the Ohio Historical Society changed, the records were not kept very well, and for a couple years they didn't get any distributions out of this grant. And so when somebody finally figured out what was going on, they decided to take that money from the Ohio Historical Society, which is a charitable organization on their own, decided they wanted to roll that money back into Piqua. And the Johnston Farm Board was very excited about that because they figured if the money was here in town, they were more likely to get it every year. And if it was in Columbus, then they had to hope that somebody remembered to send it to them. So that organizational endowment is money that we hold on behalf of the, what's now called the Ohio History Connection, but the same organization. And every year we write a check out of there and we send it to Columbus and say, here, send this to Piqua. I mean, that's the short version. But it's basically us saying, here's a reminder, here's, according to this big formula they have, here's the distribution this year. We've also sent a letter to Andy Height in Piqua so that he knows it's coming, so it doesn't fall between the cracks like it did for a while there. Sometimes organizations just don't want the issue of having to worry about their investments or anything like that. They just want some money to come out of it every year, and they don't have people necessarily in their organization that have that expertise. So in that case, they could turn it over to us as well. And the only place that money could go is back to the donor. So that's why we have to give it back to the people who gave it to us, and then they give it to the Piqua site, because it still belongs to that organization technically, but we're holding it for them. So it goes out. We also have some field of interest funds. When we do specific campaigns, we usually consider that to be a field of interest. Do you ever wonder, was there any money left over when they built the stadium? There actually was, because people pledged that money out over 5 years, but amazingly, they won't let you pay the bills that way. So you have to raise more money up front so that you have enough money to pay the bills and don't have to take out a bunch of construction loans. But then as the rest of the grants or the rest of the pledges are coming in over the last 3 or 4 years, you still have that money. So that money is at the foundation, and we consider it a field of interest fund. It can only go to maintenance, upkeep, or improvement of either the stadium or the field inside the stadium. It can't go to anything else in the school. It can't go to anything else in the community. It has to go to something related to that. And that's a donor advised fund, and there's a committee that has the athletic director, somebody from the Piqua City School Board, somebody from our board, and some community members at large, and they're the ones that make the decisions for that. And actually, that's one of the few funds we have that can actually roll down to zero, because they can spend the whole thing down. And they did when they put in the artificial turf. And then the pledges for the artificial turf came in over time and replenished it. So that built the fund back up again. We do have some unrestricted funds, and I don't know if there's anybody in this room who would have known the Sperry's, Florence and Judy Sperry.
I had the jewelry
They had a jewelry store that closed in 1972, so I wasn't here then. But they had a jewelry store in downtown Piqua. From everything I could learn about them, they're a very sweet couple, but they never had any children. And when they passed away, they left a nice sized bequest from their estate to the community foundation, just to be used for any way we felt it could be used. So that money, as well as another unrestricted fund, roll into our community grants. And I look at Myrtle because I can't think of how many years ago you wrote a grant application to us and got some money from that. But for Sunrise Center, it was a long time ago. But these funds that are given to us without strings go into this. In this case, if it's more than $50,000, then you actually get a fund named after you. But we don't say specifically we're giving out Sperry grants or Donnelly grants or specific named grants. Those all go into the big unrestricted fund, and we give those grants away both in the spring and fall. So just a little bit about the grant process. As I said, we have a spring and fall cycle every year. Any 501c3 or equivalent organization that serves the people of Piqua is eligible to apply, unless they just got a grant last year, because we try and do an every other year thing, and that way it spreads the money out more evenly. So in this case, this is protecting our waterways, going out with their canoes to clean up the river. As I said, we don't normally give grants to the same organization in consecutive years, except for the schools. And here again, I'm looking at Gretchen, because Gretchen, for a number of years, wrote grants for the Piqua City schools. Schools are allowed to apply more than every other year, because there are so many different entities within a school that could apply that they're allowed to get around that. And as I said, all three of our unrestricted funds, the money's pooled together and put into those grants, so we don't name them after specific groups. We have many grants available every year that are only for $500, and it's a one-page application. It would probably take you 10 minutes to fill it out if you knew your tax ID number by heart. Otherwise, you have to look that up. But a lot of teachers can stretch $500 farther than anyone else you know. They can do more with a $500 grant. And so a lot of times club advisors or teachers or people who just need a little more money to complete a project that they've raised almost all the money themselves tend to apply for these. This was a fire department grant, and I don't know if you can see this, but this wooden frame here is something the fire department, as I'm sure you probably know, has to do periodic like continuing education. And they found this thing online that they could build if they only had about $500 worth of wood and hinges and stuff like that, and it can be reconfigured into a lot of different shapes. So in this one, you can see the firefighter, has a foot up on this metal step that they use to climb into a high window during a fire. So this gives them a way to practice that. Then they can unfold it, redo it a different way, and now it's a low window. Or it's a, the whole thing, they showed it to us, we went over and watched it. I mean, the whole thing just kind of comes apart and goes back together like some construction set that kids would play in. But it gives them the opportunity to train for a lot of different circumstances that they would have. And that was a $500 mini grant. Some of the other mini grants, like I said, are often schools. We help to fund the Piqua Central Intermediate Run Club. We bought them t-shirts so they could run in. At Piqua Catholic, we had funded a set of robotic things that each of the kids had to follow the directions and make a robot. Standard grants are larger than $500. The application is slightly longer. We still think it's pretty easy to complete, but basically you can ask for an entire project funding, or you can ask for part funding for something that someone else is helping to fund the rest. The standard grants ask about project sustainability, because if you're asking for $5,000 or $6,000 of something, a piece of equipment or something, we need to make sure that you have thought through how you're going to sustain that once the grant's completed. Edison had done a number of different things with veterans, and this was on one of the anniversaries of the Korean War. They had a big veterans celebration out at Edison, and we helped to fund that for them with a grant. 3D printers got to be a really big deal over the last few years. We've bought 3D printers for Layman Catholic, for the Upper Valley Career Center, and for Edison, I believe. And then Edison, oh, well, there's the 3D printer. That was bad. This is the 3D printer. This is some med tech equipment for Edison. I'm sure a lot of you know that Edison has one of the most outstanding local medical training for phlebotomists, nurses, a number of different medical fields. But since the equipment is always changing that they're going to have to work on, the equipment they have to practice on is always changing. So they are often writing grants to ask for various pieces of equipment. This was a blood spinner that they put your blood samples in after they took your blood, and they could get the test results. Scott and Margaret Hinch, some of you probably knew Scott and or Margaret, after they had passed away, their family funded a new community service award in Piqua, and I know some of you are aware of this award. But Scott and Margaret were both long-time community volunteers. I think Margaret was on the board of the Flesh Public Library for 50 years, and I think Scott was on the hospital board for about the same length, both at Piqua and then at UVMC. And so they wanted to find a way to encourage and recognize volunteerism in nonprofit organizations in Piqua. So each year, nonprofit organizations can nominate a volunteer for this award. It's basically, we give two each year, a Margaret Hinch Award for a lady and a Scott Hinch Award for a gentleman, and they go to somebody who's done something really above and beyond in 1 year for that one organization. So we know in Piqua there are other things like the Order of Georgia and the Women of Excellence that recognize long-term volunteerism for many different organizations and that kind of thing. This is not meant to be a lifetime award. It's meant to be an award for somebody who did something really good for that organization in that particular year. The gentleman and the lady who are selected get a trophy, but the organization gets a $1,000 grant that they can do anything they want to with, as a result of the fact that they nominated a volunteer who was recognized. So last year's honorees, Jenny Stewart from the YWCA won for the Margaret Hinch Award, and then Jim Stammen, who is the volunteer IT guy at Piqua Catholic, won for Piqua Catholic for the Scott Hinch Award, and then in the center there is John Hinch, Scott or John, depending on when you met him. He goes by either one, the son of Margaret and John. So, okay, I think I just talked a little bit about the Bill Hartzell Community Grants. These are grants that were first given in 2017, and we are giving them away next Wednesday for the third time. These are grant applications filled out by the community organization. Again, it's one page long. We found in Piqua, and this is not meant to be a negative thing about Piqua, but 25 years ago, United Ways around the country would take a look at the organizations in their community, and they would say, the YWCA does awesome things in your community. Here's a grant. Whatever. The Piqua Civic Band does wonderful things in Piqua. Here's a grant. But some people misuse the system, so now we're all suffering from that. So nonprofits now have to fill out applications to the United Way for a specific program or a project. You can't just say, we're a great organization and here's what we do, so give us some money and we can use it for whatever we need it for. So what's happened is funding of almost all nonprofits in our community have gone to projects. And every time you're looking for money, even if you don't really need the money for that project, you have to come up with a project to write the grant for, so they give you money for that project, and then you can take the money that you were going to use on that project and pay the bills with it or whatever you need. Because organizations just aren't trusted to take the money and do whatever they think is right or whatever they need for their organization. So when Bill Hartzell left the money to this foundation to set up scholarships and grants, they said, okay, well, let's just give this money unrestricted to these organizations. We'll be like the United Way used to be. So your organization can write us a grant and say, here's what we do in the community, here's what we're proudest of, here are maybe some challenges we think are coming down the road, and the committee just looks at them and says, yeah, this is a great organization, let's give them money. And when you get the money, you don't have to say what you're going to use it for, and you don't have to write us a report later and show us that you used it for what you said you were going to use it for. It's like good faith money saying, you're a great organization in our community, take this money and do whatever you need to do with it. Because we know nonprofit organizations have little emergencies maybe in between this grant cycle and that grant cycle. They might just need a little extra money. So that's what this group does. Now, as far as we know, we're the only organization in the community that does that anymore, and we're excited that we are able to. This is a picture of last year's recipients. By next week, I'll have a picture of this year's recipients. But it is a way that we're able to help organizations that we know have done great things in Piqua throughout the years and just maybe have not had the opportunity to parent to a specific project. So why am I telling you all this? As I said, our little mission statement is that we provide an opportunity to enrich our community. So we're looking to you to help us spread the word about the foundation. People that call me and say, I have this aunt who wants to leave money to the community, they have to know we exist before they know to call me. So we hope that you'll spread the word. We hope that you'll talk to anybody in any organizations that you're part of. Now, sadly, I always feel bad when I come to the Kiwanis and I have to say this. But since you're a membership organization and not a 501c3 organization, technically you don't qualify to receive grants. But I know a lot of you work with other nonprofit organizations that are eligible to receive grants. And so help us get the word out. We have a website that's listed on here somewhere, but it certainly is in the book. It's piquacommunityfoundation.org. There's all kinds of information on there about how to write for a grant, who's eligible, that sort of stuff. If you're one of those people, like Gretchen and others, who are part of it, feel free to apply. Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Yes, Karen. Our Key Club is a 501c3 through the Piqua City Schools.
Right, and I believe in the past when they've applied as part of the school.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. And there are a number of groups in Piqua that are like that are either affiliated with the schools or affiliated with the Chamber Foundation or another group that they can write the grant through for the city, yeah. And then it flows through them.
Right.
But that's a good point. You might want to apply for a grant. Like I said, if you're part of a group that's eligible, you might want to consider planned giving. Like I said, we have people that have $50,000 or more and want to come and set up a fund, and we have other people that just leave us a bequest in their will, and that's a wonderful thing too. You can make donations restricted. So we actually have a couple people who their children have received scholarships through one of our scholarship funds. And so they want to give us a gift, but they wanted to go back to that scholarship fund that their student benefited from years ago. So you can make a restriction on the gift if you choose, or you can put it in unrestricted, tell us to put it in the unrestricted fund where it goes out to community grants. Last year, as we said, marked our 25th year serving Piqua through grant making and other philanthropic things that we do. Just to brag about ourselves, over $1 million has been given back to the community grants. These are just from those unrestricted 3 funds, not from all the other funds. Over $550,000 was given last year from just the unrestricted and restricted funds last year. So the first year that we gave grants, we gave $8,000 worth of grants, because at that time we only had a couple of funds and that's all the money we had. So the last few years is where most of that $1 million came from. But truly, since the beginning of the foundation, over $17 million has gone to the foundation, out to the community through grants or scholarships. So we're pretty proud of the fact. When the foundation was started, and I think this is where I end, so I'm going to make this real brief, but when we first started, and I say we because I wasn't there then, only the volunteers were there then, but people went around the community, like at banks and other places, and said, you need to be part of this organization. And the board asked everybody to give $1,000 to be a life trustee, and they did. So unlike some funds, I mean, there are some foundations, the Troy Foundation, for example, got started with a major grant from Mr. Detmer. We didn't get that. We got $1,000 from you, and $1,000 from you, and $1,000 from you, and $1,000 from you. And so we started in 1993 with 0. And in 25 years, $17 million back to the community. So not that that was all our money, but it came through us to the community, and we're really happy about that. So, anybody have any questions? Yes, you tell.
Probably should have made notes.
That's
What's
okay.
the difference between the 501c3 and the 501c4?
Boy, I am not the accountant in our family, but the IRS has certain categories that they call 501c3 or equivalent. And usually the organizations that we cannot fund are membership organizations. So like the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary, the Kiwanis, groups where people pay to be members and they get benefits back of some sort for membership. Now, the organizations that are membership organizations but can apply are veterans organizations, because the IRS has a special code number, and I don't remember what it is, but it's 501c something. And a veteran organization like the VFW or the Legion, if they are membership organizations and their members receive something of value for their membership, but if they can prove to the IRS that the majority of the money they make goes to benefits for U.S. military, then they're considered an equivalent organization. Same with the school district. School districts are really not 501c3 organizations, and do you know why? Because they can levy a tax. Any organization that can levy a tax, like the city of Piqua, Forest Hill Cemetery, those kinds of organizations, Piqua Public Library, they're not really 501c3, but the IRS says they can be considered an equivalent organization. So like Edison or the JVS or any school district can apply for grants, even though technically they're not 501c3. But the IRS says to be 501c3, you have to be a charitable, nonprofit organization, no membership fees, no no substantial benefits for being a. I mean, you can be a life trustee, but apparently voting on the board is not considered substantial by the IRS. So we classify ourselves as a 501c3. Warren.
Where did the hunt come in?
Where did the what?
Hunt? Was that Pepsi or the radio station?
Okay, well, okay. Now I'm glad you brought that up, because the Hunt, Richard Hunt, was not part of the Piqua Community Foundation. He set up the Miami County Foundation, different organization. And the Miami County Foundation is actually not a public foundation like we are. They're a private foundation. So, again, you're getting the IRS lost today. The IRS says if you can be a community foundation or a public foundation if the majority of your money comes from a variety of sources. That if most of your money came from one company or one family or one person, then you're a private foundation. And if you're a private foundation, there are different rules that govern how much you have to give away every year and that sort of thing. So Miami County Foundation, even though everybody thinks it's a community foundation just like ours, and that they just cover the whole county and we just cover Piqua, not the case. They're actually a private foundation at this point. Now I know they're trying to build more funds to be more of a community foundation, but at this point they're still considered a private foundation. So they have minimum grants that they have to give away every year, that kind of thing. We don't have that. So if you want to, for example, we have a couple of funds in our foundation that are building right now. So they put more money in it every year and they haven't given anything away yet. But they don't have to because we're a public foundation. If we were a private foundation, they'd have to give away 5% of the fair market value of what they own every year because the IRS wants to make sure you're not a, what do we call it? They want to make sure you're not sheltering, it's a tax shelter. Steve, you should help me out
So
there.
the Hunt started the Miami County Foundation?
Yes.
So that's another thing that Piqua did that the county benefited from.
That's
This
true.
started-
That's true. Yeah, my understanding is he started it in the beginning with a large donation, and then after he died, another influx of money from his bequest, from his his estate, propped it up even higher. So yeah, they are much wealthier than we are, and they're a very generous organization, and they give money to schools and organizations throughout the entire county. But there's a lot of confusion about what's the difference between the two, and it's not just they're the county and we're the city. It goes all the way back to the beginning with the IRS. So
You mentioned Spirities.
Yes.
That's where I bought my first wedding ring.
you know, I don't know how many people have told me that. They must have sold a lot of wedding rings there because I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, my husband bought my wedding ring there. Yours? You got your wedding rings there. Did you have a question, Beryl?
Yes. You probably have this in the report, but I can't remember. Now, does the Piqua Foundation give monies to other places that's not necessarily housed in the Piqua?
Yes.
But and what I'm thinking of is like the Franklin House
Yes.
that thought we heard Debbie Robart speak.
Yes,
She said the
talking.
largest percentage of women that come to the views is from the Piqua community, which
You know,
broke my heart to
Yes,
hear that.
I hate to hear that, but we hear that same kind of numbers from the Health Partners Free Clinic.
Okay.
A larger than
That's-
proportionate share of their people are also from Piqua. And yeah,
So-
anybody that serves residents of Piqua, they don't have to be located
That was
in
my
Piqua.
question. Okay.
They just have to serve Piqua
That-
people. So
okay.
things like the dental clinic, Health Partners, anything that
That
serves the
makes
whole
sense.
county, as long as
Okay.
they serve Piqua
I'm glad
people,
to
we're
hear
good with
that.
that. And they don't have to use the money only for Piqua people either, they can use it for their whole organization.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very
Thank you.
much for letting me know. And Erica told me ahead of time she had to leave early. It's not because I was boring her to death. So
She's heard it before, right?
she has heard it before. One of these days she's going to give it.
All right, if there's nothing else,